If you enjoy deep, emotional stories that stay with you long after the video ends, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because stories like this, they're not just told, they're felt. Ethan didn't realize how quiet a house could become until silence started echoing. It wasn't the peaceful kind, the kind people write about in books or search for after a long day. This was different. This was the kind of silence that pressed against your chest, the kind that lingered in the corners of rooms and filled every gap between thoughts. It had been like this for nearly a year now. That evening was no exception. The soft hum of a flickering overhead light accompanied him as he moved from one small repair to another around the house. A loose hinge on the cabinet, a drawer that wouldn't close properly, a light switch that clicked but didn't respond. Small, insignificant problems, yet somehow they felt manageable, predictable, fixable. Unlike everything else in his life, his hands stayed busy, but his mind wandered. It wandered back to the moment everything changed. To the absence that had carved itself into his days. To her. Emily. He tightened the last screw on the cabinet and leaned back slightly, letting out a slow breath. The kitchen behind him remained still. Except for the gentle clatter of dishes, his mother, Linda, stood at the sink, washing each plate with careful precision as if taking her time could somehow delay the weight of everything they both refused to say out loud. She looked composed, too. Composed, but Ethan knew better. There was a certain stiffness in her shoulders, a subtle hesitation in her movements. The kind you only notice when you've seen someone strong for too long. She wasn't just washing dishes, she was holding herself together. And suddenly, that realization hit him harder than anything else had in months. She had carried everything. His silence, his heartbreak, her own worries. The emptiness that had quietly settled into their home like an uninvited guest. Ethan swallowed, his chest tightening, not from sadness, but from something deeper. Gratitude. Without thinking, he stepped forward. He moved behind her and gently wrapped his arms around her shoulders. It wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It was just real. For a split second, Linda tensed just slightly as if caught off guard. But then, slowly, she softened into the embrace. Her hands, still damp from the sink, rested lightly against his arms. Ethan closed his eyes for the first time in a long while. The silence didn't feel so heavy. But then a breath. Not a normal one, a shaky one. He pulled back just enough to see her face, and what he saw made his heart skip. Her expression wasn't calm. It wasn't composed. It was fragile. There was something in her eyes, something he hadn't noticed before, something that had clearly been there for a long time. The secret? Ethan, she whispered. Her voice trembled in a way he had never heard before. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. Time slowed. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in that subtle, unsettling shift where everything suddenly feels off. Like the ground beneath you isn't as steady as it was just seconds ago. Ethan's heartbeat picked up, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty, the kind that creeps in quietly, right before everything changes. What do you mean, Mom? He asked softly. He kept his voice steady, but inside, nothing felt steady anymore. Linda turned off the faucet. The sound of running water faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. She dried her hands slowly, deliberately, as if buying herself time. Then she looked at him. Really looked at him. And in that moment, Ethan saw it clearly. Regret. Love. And something unresolved. Not here, she said gently. Sit with me. There was something in her tone that made it impossible to question her. This wasn't a small story. This wasn't a forgotten memory. This was something that had been waiting, buried beneath months of silence. They moved to the dining table. Ethan sat down, his body tense, his mind racing. Every quiet moment of the past year suddenly felt connected like pieces of a puzzle he hadn't realized he was trying to solve. Linda remained standing for a second, then slowly sat across from him. Her hands trembled slightly, and then she placed something on the table. An envelope. Worn. Wrinkled. Fragile. Like it had been handled too many times or not enough. This came she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The week after Emily left, Ethan's breath caught. It was addressed to you. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Just stared at it. A letter from Emily, a year's worth of unanswered questions, sitting right in front of him. Why didn't I ever see this? He asked quietly. Linda's eyes dropped to the table. She asked me not to give it to you. Ethan frowned, confusion mixing with something sharper. What? She didn't have the strength to talk to you directly, Linda continued. She thought giving you this would only make things harder. She wanted to protect you, protect him. The word felt almost ironic. I thought waiting would spare you more pain, Linda admitted, her voice breaking slightly. But now I realize I only made it last longer. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. Ethan slowly reached for the envelope. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. It felt heavier than it should. Not physically. Emotionally. Like it carried every sleepless night, every unanswered question, every moment he had replayed in his head, wondering what he did wrong. And now the answers were right there. Before he could open it, a sound interrupted the moment. Not soft. Deliberate. Unmistakably familiar. Ethan froze. His heart didn't just beat, it pounded. And then a voice. Gentle. Hesitant. Unforgettable. Double quotes. Ethan, are you home? Everything stopped. His thoughts, his breath, time itself. Because that voice, it wasn't just familiar. It was hers. Emily. After a year, she was standing on the other side of that door. For a second, Ethan couldn't move, didn't trust himself to, but something, instinct, emotion, memory pushed him forward. He stood up slowly and walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. His hand hovered over the handle. And then he opened it. A rush of cold winter air filled the space between them. Snow clung lightly to her hair. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold. And her eyes, those hazel eyes, they hadn't changed. Ethan, she whispered. There was uncertainty in her voice. I didn't know if you'd even open the door. He stared at her. 1,000 emotions collided at once. Relief. Anger. Confusion. Longing. But words failed him. Behind him, Linda appeared briefly. She gave a small, understanding smile, then quietly stepped away, giving them space. Emily's gaze shifted. To his hand. To the envelope. A faint, knowing expression crossed her face. So, she finally gave it to you, she said softly. Ethan swallowed. You knew she would. Emily nodded slightly. I hoped she would. There was a pause. I just couldn't say everything back then. Her voice carried weight, regret, maybe even guilt. I didn't leave because I stopped caring. The wind nudged the door open a little more. Ethan stepped aside. Come in, he said quietly. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, and just like that they were alone again. But nothing about this moment felt like before. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything they hadn't said. Why are you here? Ethan finally asked. His voice wasn't angry. It was honest. Raw. I owe you the truth, Emily replied. Her eyes met his steady, sincere. I couldn't let another year go by pretending that walking away was the best thing for you. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a wound reopening, but differently this time. Because this time, there were answers. Emily took a slow breath. Then, she told him everything about her father. About the illness, about the sudden responsibility that had consumed her life. She spoke about fear. About feeling overwhelmed. About truly believing that disappearing was the only way to protect him from a future she couldn't promise. I didn't want you to give up your life for mine, she said softly. I thought if I left quietly, it would hurt less in the long run. Ethan listened. Really listened. His fingers still gripped the letter, but now he wasn't sure he needed it anymore. Because the truth, it was standing right in front of him. You should have trusted me, he said. Not harsh. Not accusing. Just real. Emily nodded. Tears filled her eyes but didn't fall. I know, she whispered. I made the wrong choice. Silence followed, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was necessary. Truth had a way of doing that. It didn't erase pain, but it gave it meaning. And in that moment, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not forgiveness, not yet. But understanding. From the hallway, Linda watched quietly. Hope flickered in her eyes. Ethan looked at Emily. Again. Really looked at her. At the sincerity. At the vulnerability. At the courage it took to come back. I don't know what happens next, he admitted, but we can start with honesty. Emily nodded. And for the first time since she walked away, that felt like enough. Slowly, they moved toward the living room. Not as a couple, not as strangers, but as two people, finally ready to face the past instead of running from it. The night felt different. Open. Uncertain. But filled with possibility. And as Ethan sat down, the letter still in his hand, one thought settled quietly in his mind. For the first time in a long time, he was ready to face whatever came next. And sometimes, closure doesn't come from the answers you read. It comes from the courage to finally hear them. If this story touched you even a little, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because the next story might just change the way you see everything.